Call me Ishmael. These 3 words launch us into the depths of what may be the most profound exploration of the human condition ever written. They echo across centuries, carrying the weight of wandering, of searching, of that fundamental human need to name ourselves before we can understand ourselves. Herman Melville's masterpiece is far more than a tale of maritime adventure. It's a voyage into the darkest recesses of the human psyche, a meditation on existence itself. When young Herman Melville shipped out as a common sailor in 1839, he carried with him the privileged education of a New York gentleman and the desperate necessity of a family destroyed by financial ruin. His father's death in 1832 had left the family in poverty, forcing Herman from his comfortable middle-class life into the harsh realities of manual labour. This collision of worlds, the refined and the brutal, the philosophical and the visceral, would forge the unique voice that could transform whale blubber into poetry. The whaling industry of Melville's time was America's window to the world, its ships carrying democracy to the farthest corners of the Pacific. These floating cities brought together men of every race, creed and background, Nantucket Quakers, working alongside Polynesian harpooners, escaped slaves sharing quarters with college-educated officers. It was a microcosm of the American experiment, played out on the world's largest stage, where the rigid hierarchies of land dissolved in the face of oceanic reality. Whaling represented humanity's relationship with nature in its most primal form. The whale hunt was not merely commerce, it was conquest, an assertion of human dominance over the natural world that would define the industrial age. Each whale killed was a Prometheus-like theft of fire from the gods, its oil literally bringing light to darkness, powering the machinery of progress. Melville understood that this was more than business, it was mythology in the making. In the 19th century, whale oil illuminated American homes and lubricated the machinery of industry. The whaling fleet was vast, over 700 ships at its peak, and the economic impact was enormous. A single sperm whale could yield 20 barrels of precious spermaceti oil, worth a fortune in an age before petroleum. The industry employed thousands of men who spent years at sea, creating a unique maritime culture that Melville would capture in vivid detail. A whale ship was my Yale College and my Harvard, Melville would later write, and in this lies one of Moby-Dick's most revolutionary insights. Aboard the Pequod, merit matters more than breeding, skill more than skin colour. Queequeg, the Polynesian harpooner, is nobility incarnate, more dignified than any drawing-room gentleman, more skilled than any university-trained officer. This democratic vision wasn't mere idealism. Melville had lived it, witnessed how oceanic reality judged men by their abilities rather than their bloodlines. The friendship between Ishmael and Queequeg, perhaps the most tender relationship in all of American literature, represents this democratic ideal at its purest. Their bond transcends race, religion, and culture, founded on mutual respect and shared humanity. When they wake up together after their first night sharing a bed, his arm thrown over me in the most loving and affectionate manner, Melville gives us a vision of America as it could be, not a melting pot that erases difference, but a communion that celebrates it. Queequeg's character embodies the noble, savage archetype, but transcends it through Melville's nuanced portrayal. He is deeply spiritual, carving his own coffin while healthy, maintaining his religious practices, and showing profound loyalty to his friends. His tattooed skin tells stories of his island home, marking him as both exotic and familiar, foreign and fundamentally human. Through Queequeg, Melville challenges his readers' assumptions about civilization and barbarism. Yet even as Melville celebrates this democratic brotherhood, he recognizes its fragility. The Pequod's crew, for all their diversity and initial camaraderie, are ultimately swept into Ahab's monomaniacal quest. Democracy, Melville suggests, is vulnerable to the magnetic pull of charismatic authoritarianism, a warning that resonates with chilling clarity in our own time. The ship becomes a floating dictatorship, its democratic ideals crushed under the weight of one man's obsession. Captain Ahab enters the novel like a force of nature, his very presence transforming the Pequod from a commercial vessel into an instrument of vengeance. His first appearance is masterfully delayed. We feel his presence haunting the ship long before we see him, his absence more powerful than presence could be. The crew whispers about him in hushed tones, their fear and fascination building an almost supernatural aura around their captain. When Ahab finally emerges, he is both magnificent and terrible, threading its way out from among his grey hairs and continuing right down one side of his tawny, scorched face and neck till it disappeared in his clothing. You saw a slender, rod-like mark, lividly whitish. This scar, perhaps from a lightning strike, marks him as a man touched by divine fire, or divine wrath. His very appearance suggests a figure from classical tragedy, bearing the marks of his struggle with fate. Ahab's obsession with the white whale is the dark mirror of the American dream, where the traditional narrative celebrates the self-made man who bends the world to his will. Ahab shows us the shadow side of that ambition. His pursuit of Moby-Dick is capitalism stripped of its social pretenses, reduced to its essential core, the desire to dominate, to possess, to triumph over nature itself. He transforms a commercial whaling venture into a personal crusade. But Ahab's tragedy is not just personal, it's cosmic. In his war against the whale, he wages war against the very structure of existence, against the limits that define human life. He cannot accept that there are forces in the universe beyond his control, mysteries that resist his understanding, powers that dwarf his own. His wooden leg, carved from whalebone, makes him literally part of the very creature he seeks to destroy. "Talk not to me of blasphemy, man. I'd strike the sun if it insulted me," he declares. And in that moment, we see the modern predicament in its starkest form. Ahab is humanity after the death of God, refusing to accept any authority beyond his own will, any mystery beyond his own understanding. He embodies the romantic hero taken to its logical extreme. The individual will elevate it above all natural and divine law. The crew's gradual submission to Ahab's will demonstrates the seductive power of absolutism. He doesn't simply command, he converts. Through a combination of charisma, manipulation, and shared ritual, he transforms the crew's economic motivation into his personal vendetta. The doubloon he nails to the mast becomes a symbol of how material incentives can be twisted to serve obsessive ends. In Chapter 42, The Whiteness of the Whale, Melville reaches into the deepest chambers of human consciousness to explore what terrifies us most about the unknown. The whale's whiteness is not merely a physical characteristic. It's a symbol that contains all symbols, a meaning that encompasses all meanings. Is it that by its indefiniteness it shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe? Ishmael asks, and we feel the vertigo of staring into the abyss. The whale's whiteness is the colour of the blank page, the unwritten future, the unanswered question. It is simultaneously purity and emptiness, the divine and the void. In Western culture, white represents innocence and holiness, but Melville subverts these associations, showing how whiteness can also signify the terrifying absence of meaning, the colourless all-colour that contains every possibility, and therefore no certainty. This ambiguity is central to Melville's vision. Unlike the moralistic literature of his time, which sought to provide clear answers to life's questions, Moby-Dick revels in uncertainty. The whale might be God or the devil, nature or supernatural, benevolent or malevolent. It simply is, in all its magnificent, terrifying mystery. This refusal to provide easy answers was revolutionary in 1851 and remains challenging today. Long before environmental consciousness entered mainstream thought, Melville understood that the whale hunt was ultimately unsustainable. The very success of the whaling industry contained the seeds of its own destruction. Each whale killed was one fewer in the ocean. Each barrel of oil burned was irreplaceable. The industry's boom and bust cycle reflected humanity's tendency to exhaust natural resources in pursuit of short-term profit. But Melville's environmental vision goes deeper than mere conservation. He sees the whale hunt as a metaphor for humanity's relationship with the natural world, a relationship defined by exploitation, domination, and ultimate self-destruction. The Pequod's fate is sealed not just by Ahab's obsession, but by the very nature of its mission. The ship becomes a symbol of industrial civilization's war against nature. The detailed descriptions of whale processing, the cutting, boiling, and trying out of blubber are both fascinating and horrifying. Melville shows us the whale's body transformed into commodity, its life force converted into the fuel of industrial civilization. The ship becomes a floating factory, its decks slippery with blood and oil, its fires burning day and night. The try-works, where blubber is rendered into oil, transforms the ship into a hellish vision of industrial production. Yet even in this industrial hellscape, Melville finds moments of transcendence. The chapter, A Squeeze of the Hand, transforms the communal processing of spermaceti into a scene of almost religious communion. As the sailors squeeze the whale's essence, their hands touch, and Ishmael experiences a moment of perfect human connection. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this avocation beget, that at last I was continually squeezing their hands and looking up into their eyes sentimentally. This is Melville's genius, his ability to find the sacred in the profane, the spiritual in the material. The whale's death becomes a kind of communion, its body transformed into sacrament. Through these moments of unexpected beauty, Melville suggests that even in the midst of industrial brutality, human connection and transcendence remain possible. Moby-Dick's structure mirrors its themes. The novel refuses to conform to the expectations of conventional narrative, instead creating a new form that reflects the complexity of experience itself. Chapters alternate between driving narrative and philosophical meditation, between realistic description and mythic vision. This formal innovation wasn't merely experimental, it was necessary. The questions Melville was asking couldn't be answered through traditional storytelling. The novel's famous digressions, the exhaustive chapter on whale classification, the detailed descriptions of rope and rigging, the philosophical meditations on fate and free will, aren't interruptions to the story. They are the story. This is Ishmael's quest for knowledge made manifest, his attempt to understand not just whales but the whale-like mysteries of existence itself. Each digression deepens our understanding of the central metaphor. Reading Moby-Dick today, we're struck by how prophetic it was. Ahab's obsession with conquest and domination prefigures the environmental destruction of the industrial age. His refusal to accept any authority beyond his own will anticipates the nihilism of the modern era. His ability to bend others to his vision warns us about the dangers of charismatic leadership in democratic societies. But perhaps most prophetically, Melville understood that the death of traditional sources of meaning, God, nature, community, wouldn't lead to liberation but to a new kind of bondage. Without shared values to guide us, we become vulnerable to the Ahabs of the world, to those who promise certainty in an uncertain age. The Pequod's crew represents democracy's promise and its peril. Only Ishmael survives to tell the tale, rescued by the Rachel, a ship whose captain searches the ocean for his lost son. The biblical resonance is intentional, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more. But in Melville's version, the search succeeds. The lost son is found, at least symbolically, in Ishmael's survival. This survival is more than physical. It represents the democratic vision that the Pequod's destruction couldn't kill. The novel's final image, Ishmael floating on Queequeg's coffin, which has become a lifebuoy, is perfect in its paradox. Death becomes life, the grave becomes salvation, the pagan harpooner's final gift saves the Christian wanderer. It's a vision of redemption that transcends religious boundaries, finding salvation in human love rather than divine grace. The coffin, covered with Queequeg's mystical tattoos, becomes a text that carries Ishmael back to the world of the living. Call me Ishmael. The invitation still stands. We are all wanderers, all seekers, all survivors of shipwrecks we did not choose. In naming ourselves, in telling our stories, in refusing to let mystery defeat us, we keep the democratic vision alive. The whale may be unknowable, but in the attempt to know it, we discover who we are. The ocean is vast, the whale is deep, and the questions multiply like whitecaps on the waves. But we have our stories, our friendships, our capacity for wonder. In the end, that may be enough. It may be everything.